right, over the last few days, you've probably seen a lot of headlines and debates over the UCC. The Uniform Civil Code has become a hot-button topic of discussion, often seen in the context of a poll pitch by the BJP ahead of 2024 and its impact on the Muslim community. But the issue is much deeper. The idea of bringing in a uniform law for all of India's peoples has been envisioned in the Constitution as a directive principle, as a goal, not a rigid law. There's been acknowledgement time and again that while a uniform law sounds ideal on paper, its implementation in practice in a nation as diverse as ours is not going to be easy. The last Law Commission even said it is undesirable and unnecessary. One example of how tricky this is or will be is already apparent in a report that says Sushil Modi, head of the Parliamentary Standing Committee that's looking at this issue, wants to keep tribal communities out of a uniform law. So already we're talking about exceptions to the rule. But even as the debate grows, what do we really know of what a uniform civil code would look like? So let's put down what we know as per facts. So far, the union government's intent on UCC is known by what it has said in court. In an affidavit, the central government has said bringing in a uniform civil code will strengthen the objectives of a secular democratic republic. This is an affidavit filed in the Supreme Court in October last year. The government says different laws for different citizens is an affront to the nation's unity. The UCC, as per this affidavit, would be applicable to laws for marriage, divorce, guardianship of children, inheritance, succession, and adoption laws. So it's clear this government wants a UCC and what the broad ambit could be. This was made even more clear when the Prime Minister spoke of it in an address on the 27th of June, and that's what's kicked off this current round of debates. What we don't know is what a final UCC would look like and who it will impact. So let's take as a starting point what the 21st Law Commission recommended. These recommendations were put out in 2018, by the way. The tenure of that Law Commission has lapsed. There's a new one in place who wants to look at the issue afresh and has now called for people's views. But the 21st Law Commission, in its broad recommendations, said they want compulsory registration of all marriages. Legal marriageable age for men and women should be the age of majority, that is 18 years. That would effectively bring down the age for men from 21 to 18. The provision of husband as guardian should be removed. Adoption laws should be amended to allow all genders to adopt. Adoption of female child by male adult should be allowed. Deletion of 30-day notice period under Special Marriage Act 1954. It also says the law should be introduced for legitimization of children born from live-in relationships. There were also religion-specific recommendations. So, recommendations which would impact Hinduism includes abolition of the Hindu undivided family, which is tax-exempted status as of now. Both parents should be recognized equally for granting guardianship to the child. It would remove a law that puts women under the guardianship of either her father or husband. The recommendations would make it easier for Hindu women to inherit property equal to their male siblings. And the marital status of women should not come in the way of property rights. For Islam, the recommendations would change adultery being introduced as a ground for divorce. That doesn't exist right now. A common codified inheritance law for both Shia and Sunni groups within Islam. Minimum marriageable age has been mentioned. That means it would go to 18 years from the current law, which is vague. It says around puberty. No recommendations have been made on polygamy. This is important in the last Law Commission because the matter is sub judice. It's before a court right now. In Christianity, they've recommended that the time period for confirmation of divorce be reduced from the current 2 years. Right now, it asks for a 2-year separation, which is significantly longer than for other religions. In Zoroastrianism, it says Parsi women should be allowed to retain their identity even if married outside the community. Children of interfaith marriages can inherit the mother's property if they choose the same religion. That's Zoroastrianism. Now, this is also important because it would impact the Parsi community's roots. Now, at the end of all of these recommendations, as I mentioned, the 21st Law Commission actually says, not a good idea to implement this. They say instead focus on rectifying laws that are discriminatory within religions rather than bringing one uniform civil code, and make sure women and men are equal within a religion rather than making each religion equal to the other. Now, the next Law Commission, the current one, has decided to relook at the issue, ask for public views. Once these views are in, a recommendation will be formulated, then given to the government. Based on this, a law will be drafted, stakeholders will be consulted by the government, and then this bill will be introduced in Parliament, where it must be passed by both the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So that's the actual legal path to the UCC. We're talking about it right now as if it's going to happen tomorrow. However, even before all of this, the push is very clear. Today, for example, Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar says it's time to implement UCC without delay. Listening.
Any further delay in implementation of Uniform Civil Code will be corrosive of our values. The underlying sublimity of it has to be appreciated and understood. This will bind Bharat, its nationalism, more effectively, and that was the thought process of founding fathers of the Constitution. Friends, just reflect, think about it. There can be no premise or rationale to impede or delay in implementation of the directive principles when we are in Amrit Kal.
All right, to speak more on this, I'm joined now by Karuna Nundy, Supreme Court Advocate, Dr. Zeenat S Ali, Islamic Scholar, KV Dhananjay, Supreme Court Advocate with me on the show, and I'm also speaking with Desh Ratan Nigam, Supreme Court Advocate. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today on the show. Mr. Dhananjay, let me start by getting your view. Now, theoretically, it seems only right that there should be one law for one nation. Why has it become such a political issue in your view, and is the legal path to it as straightforward that if the BJP government with a majority wants to bring it in, they surely can?
Yes, to answer the last part of the question first, if you have brute majority in the Parliament of India, you should be able to make changes. Now, we also have to, first of all, determine the change with respect to which religion. It's understandable that when the BJP wants to make it an issue, they are in fact largely talking about the Muslim population. They're essentially saying that, look, there is the practice of bigamy, polygamy within the Muslim community, and then that is because the law, the Sharia Act, Application Act of 1937, gives them that privilege. Whereas, so far as the other communities, let's say the Hindus, their previous practice of polygamy was completely prohibited. So what the BJP intends to say is that we need to cut down on the polygamy within the Muslim population. Fair enough. I think that's legitimate. What is not legitimate is to do that for an electoral purpose, because the moment you want to do that, it is tainted. But so far as lawyers are concerned, we have a duty to tell you that should the BJP muster majority, a simple majority in the parliament, they should be able to say that they're in law, that polygamy within the Muslim population will no longer be allowed. That's entirely possible. But I think any debate will have to also focus on the the practical manifestations and ramifications. To begin with, within the Hindu religion, polygamy is prohibited.
1 minute, Mr. Dhananjay, 1 minute. Mr. Dhananjay, can I just ask a quick question? So I just quoted from the 21st Law Commission, which keeps polygamy out of its recommendation, simply saying that it's already sub judice. And the 22nd...
There's no concept of a sub judice. With due respect to the Law Commission, if they said something is sub judice essentially is a concept where someone is being tried in a murder trial or in a criminal trial. There is an impressionable jury. We have no jury in this country, and the Parliament is entitled to do what it believes is in the best interest of the country. No other organ has the power, or in fact even the implied authority, to tell the Parliament to not do something if the Parliament wants to do it. The Law Commission is free to discuss what it wants, but then if it chooses to impose on itself a limitation, I think it's characterized to that limitation as sub judice. It may be sub judice to the person there, but then it's not sub judice to you or to us. Parliament can, of course, do it. But what I was also wanting to point out is, look, the scheduled tribes have a greater incidence of bigamy, and we don't find the BJP talking about that. The scheduled tribes have been left out of the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955, Section 2, subsection 2. And the Supreme Court, the BJP says that the Supreme Court of India wanted the BJP to do something. Well, why does not the BJP also know that the Delhi High Court in 2021 lamented that the scheduled tribes have been left out of the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955, and bigamy is widespread relative to other communities. They have the highest incidence of bigamy. Is the BJP really also keen to check that? And would they do so with so many elections around the corner?
Okay, let me bring Desh Ratan Nigam into this. You know, it's got a political twist, but if you have a uniform civil code, it will be for everyone. This talk about let's keep tribals out is a bit of a Pandora's box, don't you think? Because then once you start making exceptions for one group, why not for others?
Well, Tamanna, in fact, quite a few representations have been received from the Northeast so far as bigamy and polygamy is concerned. This is my information. So that aspect probably can be discussed. But let me tell you one thing. Northeast has certain constitutional safeguards, and those safeguards are already there. Secondly, it's a matrilineal and matriarchal society where women have more rights than men, and men are quite happy to do it. They have given the society themselves have given those particular rights to the women, and therefore they have inheritance rights. It flows through the mother to daughters and sons, and various other provisions are there. So that the exploitation on women, so far as inheritance, adoption, other things concerned, is not there. It's a completely different kind of society, matrilineal and matriarchal. So far, the rest of the country, including Uttarakhand, where the tribals have been included in the draft proposal, where the society is patriarchal and that those exploitations are already there, exist, and therefore tribals groups themselves have agreed to be reformed. That is what the state government has said so. And therefore, the two cannot be compared. This, let us not emphasize on uniformity more. We should be emphasizing on the objective of that particular act. Suppose I call it prevention of heinous practices, exploitation, discrimination, and inequalities against women code. Everybody would agree. And everybody is saying in principle it is good, but then they are raising the issue of process, that BJP has delayed it, but they don't say, if we come, we'll immediately implement it. So
one minute, Mr. Nigam, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. This Uttarakhand draft law, nobody really knows for sure what's in it, is it? There are source-based reports across all channels and newspapers. Have you had a chance to see it in its entirety?
See, I was looking at some of the statements made by the leaders in Uttarakhand, where they had discussions with tribal groups, and tribal groups themselves have said, in order to do away with polygamy or polyandry or something, they want to be included and reformed. And it's not a matrilineal or matriarchal set of people in Uttarakhand.
No, but that's irrelevant when you're saying uniform law, right? When you're saying uniform law, you're saying equal for all. Aren't you saying equal for all?
Let me tell you, that's why I gave it another name. Call it whatever you may. But the fact is, the focus should not be lost. This is about removal of discrimination, gender discrimination, and inequality to the women. Call it by any other name you want to. But let us not lose focus. Some people do not want to give these rights to the women, and therefore they are focusing on uniformity.
No, I mean, the fact is that the law would impact larger groups. Yes, there is definitely a women's focus, but is it only about women? For example, in the recommendations which I mentioned in the 21st Law Commission, they talk about reducing the divorce separation period for Christianity from 2 years to whatever it is for everyone. Right now, 6 months, and then the move is to even reduce that. So there is a women focus, there is a women angle, no doubt about it. But when you're in a strict sense saying one law for one people, can you really have exceptions? And yes, is the welfare of women really the whole sole purpose? Let me bring Karuna Nundy into this conversation. Is it about the welfare of women, Karuna Nundy, within religions and across religions?
We can't possibly know, can we?
Yes, we
Will
don't
the
know what the law
UCC
will
get
say.
rid of the HUF, the Hindu Undivided Family, that currently runs a large number of businesses in this country? Will it abolish that? The fact, of course, is that the Hindu Undivided Family structure only is applicable to Hindus. It's not applicable to any other community. Will it suddenly get rid of the matrilineal and not matriarchal? And I must correct Mr. Nigam on that. Very few people would agree that the systems of the Northeast indigenous populations are matriarchal, but they are matrilineal. What do we mean by that? That the youngest daughter in Meghalaya, for example, and Mr. Sangma has objected strongly to a UCC suddenly being imposed, the youngest daughter inherits the land. Is it something that will disproportionately change the laws of one religion and not another? We don't know. This government has a history, it is true, of purporting to reform Islamic law. Now, the thing is that in these reforms, who got rid of triple talaq? It is the women's groups themselves, the Bebak Collective, the Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, that went to the Supreme Court and said that no more triple talaq. We plead that you strike it down as unconstitutional, but also, and this was the majority opinion, as not in consonance with what Sharia actually says. And this is what the Supreme Court did, right?
Right.
But when it comes to the UCC, we can't possibly know what we are talking about until we have something. Now, the Prime Minister has not said anything about what it's about. If it's about gender just provisions across the board, let's talk about that. If it's about gender just law and they want equal inheritance to be given to daughters, and particularly Hindu daughters, let us see the kind of pushback they get. I could, I'm going to say this on national television. I will give it to you in writing that equal inheritance for Hindu, I'm saying it on camera, so that should be good enough, that equal inheritance for Hindu daughters will not pass Parliament, even if it is tabled. Right? Whenever you look at, but what I am saying at the same time is that the debate is not whether the BJP can be trusted not to be majoritarian or whether the BJP is being majoritarian. I think that's, of course, a part of the debate. And I think Mr. Dhananjay has pointed that out quite correctly, because this government has repeatedly resisted reforms to Hindu law and, say, criminalized attempts at triple talaq when triple talaq is ineffective. So it's like saying kabaddi, 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 because now it doesn't mean anything to say talaq, talaq, talaq. And yet, if you say that, if you're Hindu and you say that, I want to leave you, I want a divorce, that is not criminalized. If you're Christian and you say, I want to leave you, I want a divorce, that is not criminalized. The Special Marriage Act, that is not criminalized. Yet, if you say talaq, 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 that is criminalized, right? So yes, there is an issue there.
All right. So important point on the HUF, and another important point that we don't know what's going to be in the law. To do this show, we actually went looking for clues, because this was the big question. What is this law that everyone is debating? Right?
The Law Commission, Ms. Inamdar, has gone back and forth, right?
Yeah, so we've gone by the latest, the 2018 sort of suggestions. We don't know. We don't know. Yeah, you're right. That's the closest we have. We've gone by the central government's affidavit in court, which says broadly what heads will go through, because that's all we know. We don't know till a law actually comes whether it will have HUF.
In marital rape and withdrew them all in the end.
Okay. This is what we know as of now, like I said. But the fact is that the conversation has begun. The conversation has begun from every which point of view you see it. So, Dr. Zeenat, thank you for joining us on the show from the point of view of equality for women, and specifically equality for women within Islam, because that seems to have become the central point of the entire discussion. That women right now are not treated equally. under the laws of this land, which are special for Muslims, and they should be treated equally, and they will if the UCC is brought in. What is your view on this?
I think I stand by that view that there has to be equality. And unfortunately, Islam gives every equality, but the present practice of the Sharia, which is called Mohammedan law, and which has had, a lot of customary law and other, changes that have been brought within the ambit of Islam, that gender justice, which is the core of Islamic values also and Islamic law, is absolutely missing. So I think that a uniform civil code reaffirms a commitment to the foundational and cardinal principle of equal rights in the legal sphere for all communities alike. And I do not agree with the fact that the tribals have to be left out. I do not agree with that. I think all Indians, when we talk about one law and, one country, one law, tribals must be included in that. And justice is the cornerstone. So here, when we are talking about Islamic law or any law, justice has to be the cornerstone. And it is treating every human being with equality and dignity, safeguarding the foundational principles of justice. That is the constitutional right of every Indian. And that is also the right of every Muslim woman. So the Islamic law, and you find that over the world, the Sharia laws, because this is part of Sharia, which is known as fiqh, which actually means jurisprudence. Now, the jurisprudential aspect, which developed over the first 200 years and then went into certain changes, it has used human intelligence. So you see, this entire concept that there is only divinity in that law and that we cannot change it because of that divinity, I think is a misconception. That has been
Dr. Ali, may I ask you a question? May I ask you a real world present day question, as you are an Islamic scholar? Do we have any kind of data, research, or an idea of how many Indian Muslims today actually practice polygamy or halala, etc.?
Yes,
what percentage of the population actually practices this? Because I'm trying to understand how widespread an issue this is.
You see, I'll tell you, strangely enough, there is only a consensus that we have in 1961, which I have published in my book called The Empowerment of Women in Islam. And the incidence of polygamous marriages was highest among the tribal communities, that is 15.25. The Buddhist community, which is 7.97, the Jain community, which is 6.72, the Hindus, which is 5.8, and the Muslims, which is 5.7. So here we have...
This is in 1961.
Polygamy at the lowest.
I have the data. I just looked at the government data. It's Family Health Survey 5. About 1.9% of Muslim women said that their husbands had more than one wife, compared to 1.3% of Hindu women who admitted to being in polygamous marriage in 2019 to 2021. Of course, in the case of Hindu women, this won't be legal marriage, but self-reported ideas of marriage. So
I mean, no, we're talking about the rights of the women. So if she's suffering a polygamous situation, then that's what the law apparently aims to correct, right? The data is important. Thank you for that, Karuna Nundy. Because armed with that, we can understand in perspective, Desh Ratan Nigam, 1.9% is the 2019 figure versus, Karuna, what was it, 1.3? 1.3
for Hindu women, and this is NFHS data, health survey data, that is used when the crime data is either, it's used to correlate NCRB data.
Okay, so let's put that into perspective. Desh Ratan Nigam, what is the expanse of the problem? And your comments on what Karuna Nundy said about abolishing the HUF. That makes it to whatever iterations of recommendations we have right now about having an equal law which will include tribal communities and, frankly, all sorts of communities. This is a very diverse nation.
Yes,
and a federal nation.
And let me tell you, this data is National Family Health Survey, which was given in 2019-20. And 1.3%, as rightly pointed out by Ms. Nundy, among Hindus, and 1.9% among Muslims, and 1.6% among others, which includes the rest. And therefore, this data can be the basis for some kind of formulation on the laws on polygamy. Now, HUF is a tax saving mechanism, and taxation is not becoming a part on the various heads that everybody is discussing. Taxation is governed by a separate code law, Finance Bill, Finance Act. And therefore, if somebody is talking about uniform tax code, it can be discussed among all parties. That's a separate thing, but taxation is not being the part of that, and it's only a tax saving mechanism. So let's not give it a religious color to it. And these are corporate practices among Hindus which are going on.
No, I'm sorry, one minute. Desh Ratan Nigam, HUF is under a special law and it's attributable to Hindus. It is also used as a tax saving mechanism, but that's a byproduct of the way the law is formulated. Is that not correct?
See, the whole issue arises whether in this tax saving mechanism, the issue arises whether women can be a karta of HUF or not. That is what the law was. However, Delhi High Court in Beria versus Lakshmi Narayan had made it very clear that women can be a karta of HUF. And that law has not been challenged, and it still holds. And probably they went to the Supreme Court, didn't succeed, somebody who challenged this. So law as it stands, it was earlier discriminatory, but through judge-made law, that discrimination has been done away with. And they can also be the manager also of the HUF.
No, but that's not the point. The point is, why do you need an HUF when you have one law for everyone in the nation? Why do you need a separate law for Hindu families?
See, the fact is only the discriminatory aspect of women will come here, and that has already been taken care of by the court.
But who has said that? Nobody has said that. I have not seen any statement.
Delhi High Court has said
in connection, sir, I'm questioning your take that the Uniform Civil Code is only about saving women from discrimination. What is that based on?
In terms of inheritance, succession, adoption, marriage, and divorce. These are few parameters. The rest, if they want to discuss taxation, fine. If everybody wants to bring in taxation, it can be discussed by the National Law Commission.
I don't know if I'm making myself clear. Yes, Mr. Dhananjay. Is the Uniform Civil Code a women's protection law, or is it a uniform civil code?
Well, coming back to the HUF, as early as 1947, the Hindu committee had in fact recommended abolition because HUF has less to do with tax. It is more to do with how succession takes place in the Hindu fold. So, as my learned friend was pointing out, tax is only a very small part of it. Now, you had recommendation to reform the Hindu law by experts who called for abolition of this, and you will find this very statement in the 2018 consultation paper issued by the Law Commission, which said that, look, so far as HUF is concerned, now HUF is a household concept that Hindus understand, and it's alien to the Islam, or for that matter, to the Christianity. So succession is a part of Uniform Civil Code. So the question obviously for the BJP is, when do they propose to abolish the HUF? Because experts have repeatedly called for the abolition of the HUF. Now, HUF incidentally obtains tax benefits, but then people are not going to oppose abolition of HUF because you are going to take away the tax benefit. They are going to probably oppose the abolition of HUF on other grounds. Other grounds would be, for instance, let's say there is a grandfather, father, and children. Now, in the Hindu fold, everyone has equal right over the property. But in Islam law, it's very different. So the right to alienate the property, the right to will away the property is radically different. Now, it would take, therefore, decades together to acclimatize the Hindu, group with the, different succession law. So this is the complexity the BJP conveniently ignores. The moment, somebody asks them when they would do something about the Hindu HUF, they would say, oh no, this has to do with direct taxation. This is practically direct taxation is a very, very small part of it. Nobody, I think, is bothered about it. You go over to people and ask them, look, you take some solace in the HUF concept, because under the HUF concept, your father, your grandfather, they don't have absolute right of alienation of the property. They hold it in trust for grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Now, if should this be done away with? Should it be possible for your father who's inherited ancestral property to will away the property to a maid, which is possible in other systems? You ask this to people within the Hindu fold and ask their opinion. What are they likely
I
to
think
say?
I,
The
I
BJP
think what this is
unfortunately
telling me,
sidesteps all this.
no, what this is telling me is that this is very, very complex. We have had a very reductive set of debates so far, which has brought it down to polygamy bad, halala bad, save Muslim women, so do away with it. Yes, bad, must save the women. But there are many, many nuances and details to what a uniform civil code will mean. Right of children from interfaith marriages, but who have a Zoroastrian mother, for example. Right to property of a Hindu woman, if she dies, will her in-laws have first right or her parents? In tribal communities. Okay, so then let me come to the basic question. Do we need a uniform civil code in this country? Do we need a uniform civil code in this country, or do we need a law that rights the wrongs which have sort of gotten carried over right now? Let me start with Karuna Nundy. Yes.
I think there's no objection to have a uniform civil code, which is an opt-in. For example, you have the Special Marriage Act, right? We already have a mechanism like that, which exists in the context of family law. Let me be clear that is it's not, gender neutral. For example, when it comes to alimony, and it has many issues. For example, the notice and waiting period, like many laws will. However, to have a UCC that is an opt-in law, so that you can opt out of whatever system of law that you are born under as the default, will be valuable, because otherwise you have to do it on a case-by-case basis. For example, if it's self-acquired property, then you can leave it in a will. If it's HUF, then it's just a lot more complicated. So that's fine. And that would also meet the BJP's sort of battle cry and dog whistle. Let's be clear that it's also a dog whistle, right? It was promised along with the Ayodhya temple. It was promised along with Article 370. This idea of one nation, one law is in a promise of a Hindu majoritarian nation is understandably very worrying to minorities. But according to me, it is also impossible. So therefore, a gender just, and when I say gender, I mean something that is free of heterosexist patriarchy and also includes queer rights and the rights of other minorities.
Okay.
Such a UCC would be fine. It would be welcome. It should be widely discussed. It should be robust. Do I think that such a law would be enacted by this government? I'm certain that, well, I can't be certain, but I am
okay. Can
very
is it desirable or necessary, like the 21st Law Commission asked? Let me come to Mr. Dhananjay on this and take into account the diversity of Indians. Of whether they're tribals, whether they're smaller communities, maybe there are some customs and practices that are not even well known in the mainstream. Do we want to bring in a uniform code, or do we want to wipe out discrimination where it is apparent?
Well, absolute uniform, civil code may not be possible in the near term at all. So if you start making an effort today, it will take 20, 25 years to bring about a substantial uniform civil code. All that we can ever hope to do is to bring about a substantial uniform code in the near term. Now, the lawmakers also have to recognize the limitations of the law. Within the Hindu fold, bigamy is a punishable offense. We've had the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955 prohibit bigamy. But then look at the data in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Between the two states, they contribute to 42 parliamentary seats. There, Hindus have greater incidence of bigamy than even the Muslims. So if the parliament is keen to make a law, the parliament should also recognize the limitations of these laws. And within the constitution, we have this fault lines. What we have done is to keep away certain northeast regions from the laws that would be framed in the mainland. we always would be able to do something or the other about it over the next 10, 20 years, like what we did with Article 370. So I don't think we should worry too much about that. We can't make a law in Nagaland, and I think we should worry more about what we do in Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh is a substantial scheduled tribe population. Why are we not doing anything about it? Now you take Delhi, the native scheduled tribes are zero. Delhi does not have a concept of a scheduled tribe at all. Within Nagaland, the scheduled tribes constitute 94% of the population. But what's the population of Nagaland? It's barely 25 lakhs.
Are
So
you saying
we
it should be
should
left
do
to the
wherever
states
we
like
can.
Uttarakhand? Are you saying it should be left to the states? Let each state decide what it wants to do?
No, not at all, because that's going to create chaos. Now, there's a point I would like to mention, and that is, I'm actually puzzled at what Uttarakhand is about to do. With Uttarakhand government fully aware that the parliament is going to debate on this bill in the forthcoming monsoon session, why is the Uttarakhand legislature going to do anything about it? Because this law, proposed law, is going to modify central laws, and therefore it would need the assent of the president. Now, the president would not be able to assent to a state law while the center is itself, parliament is itself debating a law. So why is Uttarakhand doing anything at all? I do not know what kind of objective they have here. The Uttarakhand law is going to be simply on paper. It would be impossible for it to become enforceable because the president would not be in a position to put any assent on it, because the law in this country is the president ought to know what is the kind of contravention or repugnancy between a state law and a central law. Where the central law is being, framed, changed, what's the point of this Uttarakhand law at all? And I do not want, we do not want states to do much about it. We want the center, because what we have seen is when states try to do something, they've done that insofar as the Hindu Succession Act is concerned. We've seen chaos. I'm not saying that the parliament does it all great. It's just that look at what happened in 2005 when the parliament said that they want to provide to daughters within the Hindu fold a share in the ancestral property. Under the Shastric Hindu law, this concept was absolutely unknown. And our parliament said that we will change it. So when they made that amendment in 2005, in the last 16, 17 years, we've seen nothing else but chaos in courts. Even the Honorable Supreme Court has not been able to solve that because the parliament did not debate that.
No, and also if you want to bring in a uniform law, if the idea is a uniform law, then the idea of every state having its own version perhaps defeats the purpose. Altogether. So, and then will it change with every government changing in the state? We're seeing that happening. When one government goes, another takes over from the opposite side, they start changing all the laws. So that's really chaos. Mr. Nigam, your take on whether we should have a uniform law, and can we have a uniform law in a country like India?
Tamanna, in fact, it is desirable and we should have it, and especially on those 4-5 parameters we have been discussing. And yes, in principle, I think everybody agrees, but they are slightly bothered about the process and what would be the draft ultimate outcome of it. I think we should wait for it and let the drafting committee comes out with the proposal, a bill, then we can have a more concrete debate on this subject. Yes, it is in concurrent list and the states can have their own laws. And in the absence of a central law, I don't think there is any hindrance with the president to give consent to a particular law, because there is no law as such existing made by the parliament. So that conflict of interest would not be there with the president. So as and when the central law comes, modifications can happen in the state laws if they wish to. And therefore, that impediment is not in front of the president right now.
Okay, there is a long road, though, to any version of a UCC, and we need to actually have our facts in place. I mean, even the Uttarakhand law, there are so many reports about it, including that anyone in a live-in marriage will have to go and inform some authority when they get into it and when they get out of it. Would that be implementable? Would that be in contravention to other current laws of privacy, etc.? Why should people go and do that? Is that really protecting women? So there are a lot of questions, more questions than answers. Just remember that when you watch that next debate with people screaming at each other. No one knows what they're talking about. There is no law in place right now. There's no draft in place. We're waiting for the concrete sort of idea of what a UCC would look like. Then we'll talk about whether it works. I'm going to move